All right, good morning, folks, and welcome to the On Deck Show, a show that takes a look at people and organizations that are operating outside the scope of normal to make things better for folks like you and I. This morning, we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with a gentleman by the name of Tom Haney, formerly of the Manta Swim Club, a steward that lasted 23 years, including putting a swimmer on the Olympic team who in turn medaled at the 2016 Olympic Games. He now resides in Atikokan, Ontario, back in his hometown where it all began for him. Tom's a Paralympic athlete himself and has embraced change and challenge his entire life. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. Stay tuned. All right. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Jason. That was a heck of an interview. I got goose pimples.
Well, that's you. I mean, I just summarized your resume and put it into a little intro video, and I was pleasantly, I wouldn't say pleasantly surprised. I was inspired doing my research for this when I went back and did a deep dive into you, your journey, and stuff like that. And I think this is going to be a really good conversation. So why don't we just get into it?
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
So one pattern that I found from the time you were young, and I'm sure it continues on today, is this pattern of defying the odds, embracing change, rolling with the punches, so to speak, throughout your life. Tell me a little bit about why that is for you, or how that became
Sure.
for you.
Yeah, it's a common story on many Paralympians or anybody who accomplishes something. Adversity is a big part of the ingredient. I was born with spina bifida and in Atikokan, which is a remote community in northwestern Ontario. And back in the day when a doctor made a diagnosis, it was God, like basically whatever they said is going to be the case. And once they found out I had spina bifida, I was born with it. It's a congenital disorder. The diagnosis with them was that your son's probably not going to walk. At that level of spina bifida, where it affects the spine, typically you don't see the motor development that will enable somebody to be ambulatory, like walk. However, I was the fourth of four kids, three older sisters. And my mother early on saw that the behavior that I was exhibiting wasn't a whole lot different. Yes, I had struggles and things of that sort. So my father, and my three sisters took the approach that do it yourself. Typically what you might want to do is feel a little bit of pity for someone struggling and go to help them. But strong, resilient immigrants from Scotland, gone through the war, they knew hard times and went, look, if you're going to survive, particularly in a harsh mining community, you're going to need to figure out how to be resilient and do things on your own. So climbing up the stairs, crawling up the stairs, actually, all the little things that perhaps maybe today's world, I hope not, but might be just inclined to help the child out. That wasn't my reality, nor was pity. So I came home from school, for instance, and kids had picked on me or teased me. And again, I stood out like a sore thumb in a small mining town. There wasn't just a whole lot of disabled kids. And but once kids saw that, well, I guess he walks a little funny, all of that kind of went away. I never let it bother me. I did in the beginning, but there was no room, there was no pity, there was no comfort for that, right? It's just deal with it. And so then you actually get down to dealing with the physical disability. How do you overcome this? What are the things that you need to do? And for me, swimming was huge. It was a level playing field. Yeah, at the international level, elite level, the disability really plays a part when competing against able-bodied athletes. But when you're young and coming along, you can work harder than the average 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old and be competitive. And as I got older and it got more competitive, I went the Paralympic route, and all of those lessons I had learned growing up just made me a strong athlete, which is what any Paralympic, Olympic champion, world champion knows.
Yeah, fair enough, and fantastic answer. And I guess you just digging in on that a little bit. I mean, call it the tough love approach. I mean, like, it wasn't without compassion.
Oh, absolutely not. There wasn't a time at all that I ever felt it to my parents. I got mad, go to my room and be upset and things like that. But when you get to that level of maturity, you're grateful for it. You understand that, wow, if I hadn't had parents like I had, everything that I have, I don't think I would have experienced.
And I want to get into Manta a little bit later on, but just while we're talking about this and it's top of mind, I mean, how you spent 23 years in Winnipeg, like that's a long time to spend in any one place when it comes to coaching.
Yeah.
How, like, and you got great results there. Like, how did that affect how did that influence your coaching philosophy and coaching career?
Well, I took the same approach to coaching in the beginning as I did with my swimming, right? That it's hard work. And in the beginning, I had a certain level of knowledge, like we all do when we leave swimming. You're familiar with certain sets. And I just consumed myself with understanding the physiology of what we did, the physics of what we did, and took more of a scientific approach to coaching, but firmly based in the idea that hard work gets its best rewards, and conveying that message to the kids. We had a motto at Manta: pride, toughness, respect, which they carry today, which I'm thrilled to see. And we lived it. We embodied it. Pride in the work you do, pride in the teammates, toughness because, and then respect. And so as time went by, you saw just any good coach, what works, what doesn't work. And then the biggest piece is being on a pool deck with coaches like yourself and other coaches, better coaches than us, and having those questions and saying, okay, what'd you do with this? Who'd you do with this? And learning in that atmosphere, and then learning in more formal. But I would say that being on a pool deck at nationals, international teams, like, Paralympic Games, junior nationals, world juniors, and then the World Cups, being on deck with those coaches, with those athletes, and sharing that information, just bringing it back to the kids and saying, hey, let's try this, and them being excited about these new and challenging concepts. So it was an evolution. To this day, it still is, Jason. I'll tell you, like, I've forgotten what it's like now that I'm coaching at grassroots again. I'm back to learning, reaching out to my former coaches and saying, how do you teach breaststroke kick? It's just something that is so foreign to us when we get to the international level, these, fine tuning and stuff like that. And, but yeah, it's just that constant learning, being open-minded to say, I'm comfortable not knowing.
Brilliant. Yeah. I mean, that's a great piece of advice. Coming back on track, you talked about swimming being a level playing field. Let's take that idea and kind of extrapolate. What was it like to take your swimming, like to progress through local, domestic levels, international levels, all the way up to Paralympic Games? Well,
interesting story. I'd been growing up told you're really not that different. And so competing in a sport like swimming, where there wasn't at that point in time SWAD, swimmers with a disability, it's now changed. That didn't exist. And so my first couple of years, I was competing against the body kids, obviously improving, which is the hook for swimming. That's self-improvement, never mind the ribbons and stuff. That's secondary. And so my parents, through an official in Thunder Bay, learned about the Northwest Regional Games for the Disabled, Northwest Ontario. And they approached me and said, is this something you'd be interested in? Oh, well, tears, I got upset. It's like, you've just told me all my life I'm not disabled. Now you want me to, so it took a bit of time, and I went to the first set of games and won a whole pile of medals, and everything changed. You know what I mean? I wasn't so stuck in that position. And from there, in the same year, I went from regionals to provincials, I think in Sarnia. And then in the same year, I went from Sarnia to Vancouver for nationals. So for my first experience into Paralympic sport, it was quite extraordinary, from going from yay. And through that time, that reinforcement loop, you have to remember, I already had a strong work ethic from my parents, and my coach here in Atikokan, he was really tough. And he didn't look at my disability at all. It's like, if you show up, you do it. Here are some fins if you want to keep up and kick, but that's the only exception. And so from there, you can just imagine that reinforcement loop. It's just huge. I went from being nobody to all of a sudden a national medalist, in fact, and then progressed to 84 games in Stoke Mandeville. There was the boycott in '84, so our games got moved. Half the other disabilities went to New York. We went to Stoke Mandeville, and I won 4 gold and a silver. So that was my foray into international. And then right after that, we moved away from a classification system into the classification we have now, where disabilities are integrated. When I won 4 gold and a silver, I was competing against people with spinal cord injuries. That's it. Class 6, the least disabled of the 6 of the spinal cord injuries. In '85, this new system was introduced. We went to Fulda, Germany, and I was classified as a 10, but based on where I ranked internationally. And from there, everything took off. And over time, they recognized my disability was more pronounced. So I got bumped down to a class 9 and competed in class 9 for the rest of my career. Went to Korea after suffering a near fatal accident in March. And I went to Korea at my own fault and won 4 silver. Then went to Barcelona in '92. Didn't win a medal there, just finaled. So a pretty illustrious career. There was world championships in between there. And then full circle in 1994, I went to Victoria and competed for Canada at the Commonwealth Games because it was integrated.
That's great. And that 94 was that was when you retired.
That was my last performance, yeah, in Victoria.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going to zigzag here in my questions through different things because your story is really interesting and there's a lot of really compelling information here. So I want to, if it's okay, and if you don't want to talk about it, that's totally fine. But I want to talk briefly about your mom, and then the breaking the barrier swim. Okay.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
So your mom passed away in a car accident when you were young. And the summer after, to honor her, you swam across, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Cueto Park.
Cueto, yeah.
And that was almost a 100-kilometer swim, including portaging a canoe. Yeah. The swim was coined the Breaking the Barrier swim. Yeah. Tell me about it. Tell me about the name. Tell me about why it was so important.
Yeah, it was. It was the single most important thing other than being a father that I've experienced in my life. You're right, Jason. She passed away in '92. She was coming home from where she worked, which is in Quetico Park. That's a beautiful, beautiful provincial park up here in northwestern Ontario. Pristine. My mom loved working there, but she also loved her garden. So on that particular day, May 20th, she was driving home, and for reasons we've never been able to find out, her car went off the road. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt that day, which is odd for my mother. We think perhaps it was because she had surgery on her breast earlier to see whether or not it was a cancer tumor or benign. It was benign, and that's the only thing we can think of. And so naturally, it was a massive shock to our entire family, the community. It's only 4,500 people at that time, and my mom was well known for her involvement in the community through legions and stuff, and because they knew she was a big part of my success. And so right afterwards, the Ontario government was pushing an initiative for barrier-free access to places like Quetico, which no boats, no motors. It really is a pristine, so people with disabilities have a hard time accessing it. So this boardwalk idea was fantastic and well received. And what shocked us was that they came to us and said, we'd like to name this after your mom, the Sheila Hainey Boardwalk, because of what she did for you, for no barriers for you type of thing. And so we were honored, and my family was honored. And I walked away from it going, that's not a real illustration of what she contributed to me. And then what I contribute to, the disabled community in terms of there is no barrier. You can go on to have international success. And I was familiar with Quetico Park, and being in Quetico Park, it's our backyard essentially. And I thought about it and went, there cannot be a more poignant way to illustrate that impact than to have the disabled son that they're talking about putting on that plaque do something that no one's ever done before, and that's swim across a brutally difficult park, because it's not just water. There are creeks and rivers and portages. So we set about. I had a friend, David Maynard. He knew the park very, very well. Pulled in a local outfitter, Bud Dixon, Canoe Canada. He is the largest outfitter in the area. Told them the plan. They were blown away by it and said, "That's pretty audacious, Tom. Can you do it?" I had no idea, Jason, if I could do this, right? I'm not an open water swimmer. I did huge volumes of training. I swam for Herb Debray. I mean, come on. The guy's famous for 8,000 meter morning practices. And so I could handle, I figured, the distance in the water. So once we started to put the logistics together, we brought in a team of people who would join us on the trip. We knew that we were going to do what we called grunt, guys who were going to go from one campsite to the next, because this was not going to take place over a course of a day. We knew this was going to be 3 or 4 days, and we almost built in 5 to make sure that we could do it, because the last thing you want to do is something this big and then fail. But before we did it, I spent hours and hours and hours in different lakes around where we live. And we have abundance of lakes up here in northwestern Ontario. And I always had a friend or two in a canoe to guide me. And that's what we did. So we undertook to swim. And I did a prep swim in one of the lakes that I was going to do in the formal swim later on in the summer. And I completed it. And I went, I can do this. I'm pretty confident I can do this. That, kilometer after kilometer of lake swimming gave me the confidence. I hadn't done rivers yet. I hadn't swam through a creek or any of that yet. So that was still an experience yet to come. And we got the team together. Everybody was excited. Everybody believed in what we were doing. It was a great thing to, honor this special person, not me, my mom. And we did it. And we swam. There was some adversity. We ran into a storm. I had to be pulled from the water the day after the storm because they thought I was going to have hypothermia, warm me up by a campsite, threw some warm Gatorade in me, threw some more Vaseline on. And we finished the swim. And it was pretty spectacular. There was a huge crowd at the beach. And it was a very, very, very special. And the point was made, right? So now when you talk about that barrier, that our barrier-free access, that boardwalk, it coincides with the conversation about that kid. Well, it wasn't a kid, but her son who did it. And it was always about Sheila Hainey, not Tom Haney. So to this day, it's the Sheila Hainey boardwalk and her son, which I think is important.
Yeah, brilliant tribute. And man, so that particular swim, so that was 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And the total length, was it?
Just under 100.
Just under 100 kilometers.
98.
And then is that how much of that is portaging? So portaging, walking with a canoe on your head?
Fortunately, I didn't have to portage the canoes. The crew that I had with me were pretty clear. I had to haul a pack, though. I mean, they weren't that nice.
Yeah.
Haul a pack. That wasn't probably about 1 kilometer or 2 in total.
Yeah.
It's treacherous terrain, right? These aren't boardwalks like it was at the other end where we finished.
Yeah.
This was in the middle of nowhere. So they were challenging. But the first day was really interesting. We had no idea what to expect. And the second day, we got there on the Wednesday night. And I wanted to make sure I did the whole park. So we started at the western edge of it. And it was a 10-kilometer swim that evening just to get to the ranger station where the rest of the team would get together. And that's essentially where we would start. So we accomplished 48K on the Thursday, right?
Wow.
With days left to go. So everybody breathed a bit of a sigh of relief until the Friday when the storm hit and the water was frigid, and we got it all done. And then we finished up on the Saturday. There was, like I said, a ton of people on the beach. It was wonderful. Yeah. No
kidding. And what was it? I mean, it must have been just, it must have been an emotional moment for you walking up onto the beach.
Yeah, it was. But at that point, Jason, to be honest, is kind of the conversations that I had with my mom throughout that swim. It wasn't as emotional as I thought. It was like, yeah, we did this. Thanks, Mom. And for everybody else, it was. Wasn't a dry eye in the place. And there was some pretty. The ceremony itself was pretty special. So the whole day was a celebration of my mom.
That's brilliant. And so coming back to the Paralympics. So, the Paralympic movement started shortly after World War II as basically a mechanism to get injured soldiers, give them purpose, give them something to do, and so on and so forth. And it's kind of grown. I mean, it's definitely grown into a worldwide movement at this point, right? It's embraced by everybody.
It's incredible.
But from a breaking barrier point of view, you've talked to me about your experience, but the global movement, what does that mean to you?
Well, a lot, because it was fledgling when I first started racing. The biggest name in Paralympic sport was Rick Hansen. And Rick and I were roommates in '84 at Stoke. And Stoke is really where it started, Stoke Mandeville in England. That's where, like, as you referred to, the injured soldiers, this was their chance to compete. That's basically where it all started. So it was an honor for me to be able to compete and have the success I did. I went back to Stoke a few times for annual championships after that, and I had wonderful success there. And I remember having this conversation with Rick. I'm not sure if he'll remember, but I was young, right? I was younger than them, and here comes this kid out of nowhere and is a star. I'm winning 4 gold and 3 world records, a silver medal. But Rick was great, and so were all the other guys, Mel Fitzgerald, and a bunch of the guys who'd been doing this for a bit. And Rick shared with me his Man in Motion tour. He told me he's going to wheel around the world in '84. As us, like, okay, well, that's audacious. That's the most outrageous. And you're in a wheelchair, and you're in a 1984 wheelchair, not what we have today. Now, he didn't do it in '84. And so, but I'd like to take a little bit of pride that those successes and the person that I was as an athlete that trained like an able-bodied athlete, trained with able-bodied athletes, didn't use the disability. Not that any Paralympic Olympian did, but this was new. When I was being classified, one of the measures that they had, how much do you train? And when I explained to them 9 times a week, 45, 55,000 meters a week, it was foreign to the people who were classifying me, that they hadn't seen that in a swimmer. And then slowly but surely, other great Paralympians, particularly Canadians, Andrew Haley, case in point, Stephanie Dixon, started to move it forward. In Canada, we were always on the front edge of the Paralympic movement. We always had the wheelchair basketball team very good. Arnie Bolt on the track, on high jump. We were always, and Canada's always been very good. And the world has caught up. And as a result of the world catching up, you see this appreciation for athleticism. So now it's no longer just looking at athletes with a disability competing. You're looking at great performances, and you're looking at athletes competing, And so I take a great amount of pride in the fact that I pushed hard to be a lobbyist for the Paralympic movement, because it had given me so much. You have to give back, but I wanted to. So to see it where it is today is wonderful. There's so many great Paralympians that came through when I was coming through. I shouldn't say that, just athletes that just changed the way the public governments look at sport for athletes with a disability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see the passion, the appreciation in your answer and your voice. So I want to come back to Manta. We touched on it briefly before. So after your swimming career, you moved to coaching, where you spent the better part of 2.5 decades with the Manta Swim Club in Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. While you were there, you had success at all levels, including, Chantal and getting her on the 2016 Olympic team, mm-hmm. And helping her to win a medal at the games. So there's 2 parts to this question. The first part is what drew you into coaching?
Well, teaching. I started teaching love of kids, actually, at a very, very young age. Of all the guys that I graduated high school, I was nominated to be the first one to have kids. So I was teaching swimming lessons here in Atikokan while being a lifeguard and training with the Nakokita Swim Club under Randy. And then that progressed to an on-deck position. And every coach who starts out at that level just it's intoxicating to see those big eyes looking up at you, and they attribute.
I just want to interrupt you for a second. When you say Randy, are you referring to Randy Bennett?
No, Randy Makarenko. He was
Okay.
my coach here.
Okay.
I attribute a tremendous amount of my success to the way he approached me. And so that was the Nakokita Swim Club. So I took a position just as a mini coach and fell in love with it. You go to a swim meet, the kids have fun, they get better, they love you, you love them. It's the drug of coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
The adoration that you have for each other. And it just went, and also the innate competitive, right? How you can't be a medalist in the international arena without having a competitive spirit. And so that took it to that level. And I went to Winnipeg for school. I had originally gone to Brock, and I had an accident that I left Brock and went to finish my degree at U of M in Winnipeg. And I started coaching with the Manta Swim Club. Or no, actually, I started coaching with Dean Hensey in Selkirk.
Okay.
And then I progressed to work with Jerry Newfield at Manta. I coached there at an age group level. Again, fell in love with it. Carrie Burgoyne was one of the top swimmers I coached. She went on to have an illustrious career with Manta and Calgary. And from there, Randy Makarenko had stopped coaching here in Atikokan. And I was asked, would you be willing to come back? And I'd finished my degree. And I had every intention, Jason, of going to medical school, as foolish as that was. Because as good as I was as an athlete, I wasn't that as a student. And I kind of knew deep down that probably wasn't the route I was going to go. But nonetheless, I wrote the MCAT and went through the motions and didn't get accepted. So I thought, you know what, I'll go to Atikokan, make some money. I love the community. And I coached there for 3 years. And then the head coaching position for Manta came up. The people who were on the hiring committee were in part parents of the kids I coached on my first time around. So they remembered my involvement. They remembered that kind of coach I was. And they kind of wanted to move back to more of a grassroots development piece. And so they hired me. And it's actually 20 years that I coached in Winnipeg. And it went from, being this shock of anybody in the country at the time knew Manta was this top age group program. Why are they hiring? I hadn't had a reputation of being a good coach. And it took a bit to prove it. And then once we got on a roll and once people bought into this pride, toughness, respect, and the hard work, and there was still that. Kevin Thorburn, he was there, had developed a really strong work ethic anyway. So it was just more of the same. And then we went on the ride like, many coaches do. Good athletes came to swim from us, from other programs, and we developed athletes within. And I think the respect that we gained the most in the beginning was that we were taking very average athletes and getting them to national levels by believing in them believing in themselves, and that hard work ethic. And then you hone your skills as you're coming along with these national qualifiers. And then there's an age group national record. Aaron Shannis LaRue, 200 free, and then a superstar like Chantel comes around where there's a whole pile of them, and Brian Swick, and we just had this whole stable of good athletes that we ran with it for quite a while. And in that time, it gave me a chance to be on the pool deck with Randy Bennett. The most significant learning experience I ever had is when I went on a trip with him to Australia. It changed the way I coached. And I'd like to say from that point on time, I became an elite coach. I understood what that meant, the mentality behind it, stopped being a little defensive. I was at first, but he pushed through it and got me to see what needed to be seen and changed me, and allowed me to start having those conversations on the pool deck. Bill Sweetenham in Sweden at a World Cup, just walking up and saying, pleased to meet you, and sit down for 45 minutes and talk. That was extraordinary. Mm. And the shared information, coaching conferences, and just being on a pool deck and listening to who does what with whom, and, sharing the test sets and sharing different sets. And Sean Baker and I, to this day, he annoys the hell out of me. He sends me all these crazy workouts that he's doing with his kids right now. And I can't even understand it. It looks like Chinese. It's so complicated. But it's to this day, I'm still, and now that I'm back on the deck coaching, I'm really hoping that I can continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like people should keep an eye on your area because, like if history is any indication, we should be looking for something out of your area pretty soon. So
There's a couple of
pretty soon in swimming years might be a decade, but
yeah.
so
I don't think so. There's some keen kids in our community that haven't seen anything like this before, right? This type of organization, and it's unfortunate that we keep going through this rolling. It's hard to keep them motivated. They're just young and new, but yeah. Well, thanks, Jason. Yeah, I'm hoping we're gonna see some colleagues at provincials and then nationals in a couple of years.
Yeah, fair enough, and my pleasure. I mean, like the words are true. So. Just sticking with Manta for a sec. So you talked to me about what you brought there. What did you leave? Like you decided to, like basically return home a couple of years ago. What did you leave at Manta before you left?
A surprise.
Oh,
yeah. It wasn't a move anybody expected. It wasn't a move I expected, and it's unfortunate. But there's quite a few factors in play when we made the decision as a family to move. I have a summer cabin up here, and my family's up here. And, Chantel, although I wasn't coach of record for the 2016 performance, she just missed the Olympic team by 1/100th of a second in 2012. Mm-hmm. So, and for all intents and purposes, that performance, I consider that worthy of being on the 2012 team, right? She didn't, and we just didn't get it done, right?
Right.
We talked about that, but she was there, right? So every coach's dream, for the most part, is to put somebody on the Paralympic team, somebody on a World Championship team, somebody on an Olympic team. Well, I did that. So you get to that point where, okay, do I have this motivation to provide that program daily to the kids? My answer would be yes, but not an emphatic yes, right? So it's like, okay, maybe it's time for a change. And we hear about coaches needing that all the time, a sabbatical from it, because it's not just it's never the deck issue. It's all the other issues that you're dealing with, the pool time, and just all the stuff that comes with coaching amateur sport. So an opportunity came to Atikokan to try something different, and I talked it over with my wife and my daughter, and they thought it was the right move. They both wanted to move back to this area, and so that was my decision. But I was fair. It was, I gave them plenty of notice and things like that, and was willing and still am to contribute, to help out. There was no ill feelings. It was the contribution that Manta made in my life cannot be, explained. It was just, I loved every minute of it. It was wonderful. And, like I said, when we first started talking, Jason, the thing that I like, the pride, toughness, respect motto that we came up with. And there's a lot of thought. I know that some people say mottos or whatever, but we went, if we're going to do this, let's actually make this something we believe, and it was part of our cheers. It was part of, and the fact that Rob, who came in, and current coach, they still embrace that. I love it. So what I left, I hope, was a reputation of being a fair, hardworking, driven coach, athlete-centered, athlete first.
Yeah, brilliant answer, and I believe that to be true from what I've seen. So that going off my plan here a little bit, just coming back to what you just said, I mean, that level of self-awareness, I mean, that comes from experience, that comes from, life, kind of whacking you across the head a couple of times. And, so I'm wondering if you can tell me just your thoughts on the importance of having that self-awareness.
Well, in our profession, it's essential, because what we ask of families and the athletes is nothing short of absurd. The commitment that's required to have success in our sport is unprecedented. And I mean that on the athlete day-to-day level, the athlete on the weekend decisions level, and I mean that on the parents driving the kids to swim practice in the morning, paying the huge fees that it costs, and the commitment of being on a pool deck, timing, selling chocolate bars, or in Manta's case, staying up till 2 a.m. with the Red Nose program. If you're not conscious of that as a coach, then I don't want to say selfish, but I don't think you can be fair, right? Because you have to, when you ask that commitment, you got to be prepared to have that commitment back, which means that you've got to give up family life. You've got to do these sorts of things. And if you're not, and that was the question that was bouncing around in my head. Like, I could write workouts in my sleep, good workouts. I've been doing it for years. I could still reach out to, coaches across the country in Blondell and Calgary, or, any of the guys, and we would share sets and help me through this or whatever. But it just came at a point in time when, okay, I'm not there, and maybe it's because I went the full distance as an athlete to the highest levels I could. And maybe I went to almost the highest levels as a coach. I shared in the success that Chantel had in 2016. I like to think that what we did together was a small part of that. And that was 2016, right? So, 2017 rolls around, and that's a year after that performance. And I don't want to say it's all weighted on that. It wasn't. There was a bunch of other factors going on behind the scenes. And so that's self-awareness. It's interesting that you say that, because it is true. It was, I can stay and do this. I didn't leave because it wasn't fair to the kids. Don't get me wrong. It was a selfless motivation to go, okay, it's a combination of things. I don't think I can give as much as I could give before. Here's another opportunity to try something new, a new challenge. And my family was going to be happy with that access to a more relaxed life. Elite coaching is not relaxed.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that's brilliant and superb advice for anybody listening. So that fits nicely with, I guess my next statement or question. So life has kind of come full circle for you. You're back where you started.
Yeah.
And, now correct me in terms of how to say the name of the town. I practiced it about, several times.
Good luck.
Atikokan.
Atikokan. We take any pronunciation. It's like a wine cocktail drink, for crying out loud. No.
Yeah.
Atikokan. Yeah. But Atikokan sounds more articulate, so go with your version.
Okay, sounds good. So you started swimming there. Now, when we spoke back at the PRO conference back a few years ago, you talked about starting up the club. So did that mean that you repatriated the club? You brought it back?
Yeah. What had happened is that over time, after I left, coaches came, coaches went, and the program, not unlike small towns across the country, the program just dissolved. And that was quite a lot of years. And I knew I'd come back to coaching. And my daughter, loves swimming. So we can't do this alone. So let's see what the interest in the community is about. And Atikokan's a small town. So anybody who does anything that's successful is celebrated and remembered and honored. So even though it was some time later that I came back, the memory of the town knew that this was Tom Haney, the athlete. There's a sign when you come into Atikokan that welcomes home of Tom Haney, right? Amongst other athletes who we celebrate. So it was a little easier to get the ear, a platform to have a meeting. And we had many parents come out. And I went through what the program's going to look like from its infancy, basically Manta Light, right? I was just going to duplicate the entire structure that we had at Manta, but not so high end. We're just focusing on getting kids in the water and learning how to swim, essentially. And once that we started getting that ball rolling, Darren at Swim Ontario was fantastic. He was really big help. All of the guys at Swim Ontario were big help. Helped me guide through it. It's a complicated process, starting up your own club, policies, procedures, getting incorporated. But the energy that I saw in that room, Jason, said, okay, there's a real potential for this program to get up and running. And we did a mock spring session in 2018, and the interest was there. Kids were there, gave them certificates. It was a lot of fun. And then when 2020 came around, we did another version in 2019, and then we went through the motions like we were swim meet, other than not going to, or swim team, other than not going to a swim meet. And we did some mock stuff in our pool. When 2020 rolled around and we were told, okay, you're good to go, Tom, your program has met the criteria, you're an official swim team. We had 30 kids register. So, and of course, lockdown and 2, 3, and now we're in a shutdown again. I'm hoping that when we finish all of this, the majority of these kids come back and they get it. We show them the ISL, what swimming has become nowadays, and they understand who Michael Phelps was, and they're learning who the Canadian swimming heroes are, and becoming students of the sport, which we both know, if you're not a student of the sport, then you're only going to go so far. So
Right.
Teaching them to be students and learning and be hungry for that is a part of it as well. So I'm not sure if I rambled on, if I gave you information you wanted, or.
Yeah, no, that was great. Essentially, I wanted to know if, upon your arrival, you made a conscious decision to restart the swim club, which it sounds like you did.
Yeah.
Definitely sounds like the reputation of the Tom Haney and the Hainey family, is become a legacy. And that certainly helps in terms of what you're doing. And I like how you referenced it, Manta light, like looking at what's worked in the past and bringing it there, and building it up and moving it forward from there. So I'm sure it's going to be good. I'm sure the kids are going to have a great experience. And
so sorry to interrupt you. And you're more than welcome for this invitation as well. My intent, once we get COVID clear, is to have some of my friends, my colleagues, some of the best coaches in the world come up for guest appearances and do an on-deck session. I've done that with Coach Henze, right? And I fully intend to do that and stay at the cabin for a couple nights and do some fishing and Pepsis and, talk swimming, just talk swimming. One of the best summers I had, Coach Kramer out of the University of Minnesota, we've sent a few kids there on scholarship, and he came up and spent a couple of days or 3 or 4 days fishing and sitting on the deck at night with a cigar and a Pepsi and just talked swimming. And that was a real wonderful experience for me, because I was limited to the NCAA experience just through the kids that we sent there. So hearing his stories of everything like that, it was wonderful. So my intent is to make this an open door policy for coaches, all my friends over the past, 30 years, to come fish for a bit. We got lots of it, and come and coach my kids. And I had no problem with that.
That's brilliant. And I think that, there's a certain, call it self-security, more than self-awareness there when you talk about inviting people in and helping to build the greater culture of swimming in the community there. And that's it really is the greater good. If I can sum it up, and you mentioned this in various ways throughout our talk, it's not about Tom, it's about the kids, it's about the community.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thought that can resonate with many people, and a lot of people can learn from that. What's it like to be home?
Oh, it's great. It's great in 2 ways. And let me tell you why. The job that I came back from is not the job I have now. This was a complete fluke. And so the job that I have now, which is community services manager. So my coaching is volunteer, and I plan that to be till retirement, right? I love that. I'm a volunteer. I'm a volunteer coach. It's just, I love that feeling. And so community services manager here, it's a great job. It's crazy at times. COVID has really made it complicated, but I manage a golf course, an arena, a pool, a seniors active living center, an outdoor recreation area, amidst all the programs. And so knowing what I know from what sport can do for kids, what sport can do for people, particularly coming from that high-end point of view, it's great. I'm getting to do a whole bunch of things in other areas that I never dreamed about. This is not something I thought I would finish my career with, but no headaches with pool time. If I got as Coach Tom, I'm upset with it. I phone the community services manager and get back, and everything gets sorted out. Because the coach is always smarter than the pool manager. But yeah, so, and the resources I have that I just mentioned to you before when we came on the air, the success the club is having in reaching out for financial support. So we have a lot more means. I'm buying a ton of equipment for the kids. We're just going to get them a bunch of snorkels and fins, and they don't have to go to the pocket for that. The community is supporting it. And when we can use snorkels again, right?
Yeah.
But a video system, all the things that I believed in Winnipeg with Manta, we're going to do here. And that translates to our junior golf program. We're doing things for the junior golf program that they didn't realize could be done, right? And so moving back home, and my cabin's 10 minutes away, Jason. And it's beautiful. It's right on the water. I have to finish it. There's a lot to do to finish it, but any job that you care about is going to be stressful. So the stress of this job is my professionalism, my competitiveness, wanting to be good. But going to my cabin, sitting on the lake, going for a paddle, it all goes away. And it's a wonderful community. Small communities they support one another. So yeah, it was a good move. As sad as at times when I look back and miss everybody in Winnipeg, I embrace what we have here.
Yeah.
Well, I was serious about that invitation.
Well, I will. I mean, next time I make a drive across the country, which usually happens once a year, it hasn't happened last year and won't happen this year because of COVID. But definitely, thank you. Definitely take you up on that. But what you just described is, it seems like it's a reward for, a lifetime of service to the community. So
that sure feels like it.
Well, and as I said at the beginning, this, it was inspiring. It gave me goosebumps reading and listening to some of the stuff as I was preparing for this, and so on and so forth. And given everything you've done, everything you've overcome, and what you're doing now, do you have any final thoughts for people listening?
What I love about our profession, Jason, is an example of what you're doing today. And thank you for this, because this is important at this time. That conversation's on the pool deck, that we keep sharing our personal troubles and be open to the support, which has been wonderful. Keep sharing ideas. That I think that's what I love the most and miss the most, to be quite honest. This has been fantastic morning chatting with you. And I think in everything that I experienced in the profession, be open to learning and be open to sharing. And I think it makes the coaching experience or whatever you do that much better. Constant learning, it just builds confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will be interesting if you're open to do a check-in maybe in a year's time from now, because one of the things I'm curious about now is the impact that you're going to have on those non-swimming programs, like you mentioned, like the junior golf program and stuff like that, and how you might open their eyes to a different perspective and how things might progress. So certainly an area of the country to keep our eye on. And
thanks,
I've really appreciated this conversation. It's been really informative, and I've enjoyed it quite a bit. So
yeah, I enjoyed it as well. It's not so much that we were talking about me, but just reliving some of the memories that I've had in the past 20 years. It's nice to go down memory lane, and when you're in a fast-paced job like this, you don't often have the chance. So thanks for inviting me on. And I think what you're doing is awesome, and keep doing it. I'm looking forward to seeing more of your podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, and thank you for your support throughout the year. So,
all right,
thank you.
Crash at the starting line. Engines pumping and thumping inside.
Hey, if you like that, head over to YouTube and check out the Ocean Junction channel. Make sure to like and subscribe for more great videos featuring amazing speakers. Thanks for watching.